Char and Zeon is here to strike back with the full power aggro rush deck. Focusing on green as the main color, this deck plays a ton of zaku units with low cost and low level in the early stages to flood the board. The idea is to attack repeatedly and float additional zaku tokens alongside with your other effects. As ironic as it seems when it comes to the lore, the secondary color of this deck includes the blue units, specifically from the Earth Federation and white-based team trait. That is to have Gundam RX-78 and Armor Array to support the aggression strategy, which the effects can help you rest down the opponent's units and also take out bodies at the same time. By utilizing Char as your main pilot, it can link together with your Zeon units to go for big combo plays as well. So let's go ahead and begin with the deck build, starting with the level 1 cards, which I'm running 4 copies of Zaku 1. Whether you're going first or second, these are the units that you want to deploy out immediately to start setting up tempo. For the other level 1 cost drop, I'm also playing 4 copies of Dot. Different to Zaku 1, it has an effect once you deploy it to look at the top card of your deck, and you get to put it back to the top or the bottom so that you can plan ahead in your following turns depending on what units you need to deploy out in the following levels. That's it for level 1s. Now let's talk about level 2s, which I'm running 4 copies of Zaku 2 from GD01. Also a 1 resource cost to deploy out with 2/2 stats. As for the other Zaku 2 from the starter deck, I'm also running 4 copies. Similar reason, also a 1 cost to drop, but this time it has an effect to gain additional 2 AP as you attack with it, which is great for taking out the EX base right in the get-go. And then to wrap up for the level 2s, I'm running 4 copies of Gun Tank just to ping damage to the enemy rested units so that we can take out weaker bodies if we ever need to, or if we ever decide to go for trades and then we want to use this to finish it off. Level 3s, this is where we get into the mid-game boss cards that we're going to be playing, which are going to be the 4 copies of Char Zaku 2 from the starter deck. A simple effect that when it's destroyed, you get to look through the top 3 cards of your deck and grab anything that is Zeon trait and add it to your hand and then return the rest to the bottom. Therefore, generally, you don't mind if this unit ends up getting destroyed so that you're gaining value to gather additional cards in your hand so that you can continue to play additional units later on as well. As for the other Char Zaku 2 from GD01, you also want to be running 4 copies of it. That is because you want to gain the effect of during pair and it's destroyed, you get to deploy out a Char Zaku token that is 3/1 and rested. This is mainly the unit that you want to link together with Char so they can attack the same turn, or otherwise at least pair it with a pilot so that he can gain the benefits of its when destroyed ability. Speaking of spawning out tokens and continuing that trend, I'm also running 2 copies of Goof, which can spawn out a Zaku token with 1/1 stats immediately once it's deployed. And then to wrap up for the rest of the level 3s, I'm also running 2 copies of G-Fighter just to give any of our friendly units that's white-based team trait specifically high maneuver to play around the opponent's blockers. And for this particular deck, the main targets that it can have is either Gun Tank itself or Gundam RX-78. That's it for level 3s, and now let's talk about level 4s, which are going to be the main boss units, which you're going to be including in this deck, starting off with the 4 copies of Char's Gelgoog. This is a fantastic card to help you recycle your Char pilots from the trash and then attach right underneath it simply by trashing 1 card from your hand that is a Zeon trait. By doing so in the main phase, this card then becomes linked together with Char so that it can make an attack the same turn it was deployed. And then for the secondary level 4 boss unit that we're playing, which I mentioned earlier as well, is the 3 copies of Gundam RX-78. Having Repair 2 is great to keep this unit healthy so it can stay on the board for as long as possible, and ideally linking it together with Armor Array so it can rest down the opponent's units to either take them down and then also gain additional AP at the same time where your entire board gets that additional buff, or even utilize it to take down the opponent's base, which has relatively high health. But that's it for all of our unit cards. Now let's talk about our pilot cards. With Char being the main pilot of the deck, you certainly need to be running 4 copies of this guy. You can pair this pilot with any unit to give it additional AP as it attacks, but you mainly want to prioritize it linking it together with Char Zaku or Gelgoog so that you can gain the ability of high maneuver to play around any opponent's blockers. There's so many situations where you take down all your opponent's shields and bases, but they're able to stabilize with a ton of blockers in the late stages of the game. Simply having a combination of this card with any linked unit together can easily win you the game. And then for the secondary pilot, which I mentioned from earlier, are the 4 copies of Armor Array, just so that you can link it together with your white-based team trait cards, such as G-Fighter or Gundam, so that you can attack the same turn as deployed, but mainly utilize it so that you can pair its effect to rest down your opponent's units with 5 HP or less, which you mainly want to focus on blockers to help you make successful attacks into the opponent's base or shields. That's it for pilots. I'm not running any command cards in this deck, which I will talk about a bit more in the tech choices later on, but to wrap it all up with the base cards, I'm running 3 copies of Foul Mail. Just like Char Zaku 2 and Goof, this is mainly to help us deploy additional tokens so that when swarm the board, and this one specifically deploys out a Char Zaku 2 token with 3/1 stats. Tech choices and other cards that you guys can also consider including in this build are additional base cards such as white base or even Corsica base, which can play additional token units as well. Just because of the popularity of aggro and rush based decks, oftentimes you're going to find yourself facing against mirror matches or decks with the same game plan, which tends to play out low level cost units on the board with very little health. This is where you can consider teching 1 or 2 copies of Adzam as countermeasures against those matchups to wipe out your opponent's boards if they ever overextend. Since this deck focuses heavily on the early game stages and you're trying to attack as much as possible, a lot of your units will end up being destroyed into your trash, and that is where you can also consider playing Big Zam, which is a huge countermeasure against any blocker based decks because they prevent you from winning. As long as you have 10 or more Zeon unit cards in your trash, once you deploy it out, you get to deal 4 damage across all units with blockers, which are mainly intended to play around your opponents. Otherwise, it's just another giant beat stick that you can get into in the later stages of the game with Breach 4. If you're looking for draw power, you can always include the Show of Resolve to help you draw more cards, but you mainly want to just focus on playing as many units, therefore I wouldn't recommend teching in any more than 1 or 2 copies of this card in the deck as well. Otherwise, there's also Citizens, which can buff up all your units with additional 2 AP for the turn if you ever want to go all out with an explosive barrage of attacks. Combos and how to play the upgraded full power Zeon Rush deck. Let's talk about whether you want to go first or second. Generally, in most of the game right now, just because of the meta and the format of being best of ones, you don't know what your opponents are playing, so going second is always most ideal just because you have the EX resource additionally to help you go play. But this, I would say, one of the exceptions is one of the decks that don't mind going first if your opponent gets to choose and makes you go first instead, because you do play a handful of 1 cost level 1 drops that you can dish out right away even if you don't have the EX resource. So of course, this is where you want to try to see how you want to go for your mulligan hand, depending if you know you're going first or second. So when it comes to that, you just want to see a lot of low cost units in the early stages. Ideally, you want to see a char zaku alongside with char so that you can link in the later mid stages of the game, which really comes soon. And then eventually you can go for another link play with Armor Array with Gundam RX-78. And then in the slightly later stages of the game, that's when you get into Char's Gelgoog to grab your char back and link it straight from the trash, which is exactly how you want to try to attack as much as possible. And if you ever see your foul mail, that's how you want to utilize it to establish your base, get an additional card from the top of your shields, and establish more tokens on the board as well, and keep attacking. So let's assume you're right away at level 1. You just use your 1 resource to play out either your Zaku 1 or your DOP to look at the top card of your deck, and then you choose on how you want to arrange your next turns depending on what you need or what you want to play or what you want to search. For the level 2 plays, this is where you can go for additional 1 cost units if you want to play them out, and just keep spawning these guys as much as possible. If you ever can, try to play Zaku 2 as well, just because itself being able to gain additional 2 AP as long as it attacks is a really great way, an effective way to get rid of the enemy's EX base right off the bat. That's how you want to go ahead and do so. And as you continue to ramp up with more resources, you're just going to continue to play as many 1 cost or 2 drops as much as possible. In any situations, if you see an opponent with a unit that is rested when 1 or less HP, that's usually where you use Gun Tank to snipe it down to ping out that 1 less damage there. You keep attacking. You don't mind if your units gets destroyed for whatever reason. You just need to keep using and forcing your opponents to go for trades and weaken their units on their side of the board as you go ahead and start hitting them. But as we move on to the level 3 early game stages of the play, this is where you have the option to play out the Char Zaku 2. And you can also choose to link it together with Char here to make an attack immediately, gaining additional AP as you attack, and also high maneuver where your opponents can't block. It has a destroyed effect to help you search and grab any card that you need. And generally, you may not want to exhaust your Char that early in the stages of the game, especially if you ever have this other Char Zaku to be utilizing it along together with instead. But if you ever need to take down like a 5 HP unit that your opponent has that is linked that you need to address, this is pretty good on with the high maneuver so that they can block and stop the attack, but then not being able to do so, you will trade in that unit and still get value out of it like there. Otherwise, this is where I like to play this one and then save the Char to link it there, and then same thing, I get to trade into a 5 HP unit as I get 5 AP in total, or go straight for their shield or base if I ever need to. And if this ever gets destroyed, this is where I get to play out this token right here. Same go for foul mail. This is how we get to play out the Char Zaku 2 tokens as much as possible. And if these tokens survive, that's fantastic. That's exactly where we start attacking with them as we go wide as possible. And speaking of tokens, as for other level 3 plays, you can also play out Goof, which will then spawn out another Zaku token here right here as a 1/1 stat. and then you're establishing more board presence with it as well. Now let's move on and talk about some level 4 plays that you can execute with a deck, where this is where you would go ahead and play out Gundam RX-78, link it together with Armor Ray to rest down the opponent's unit with 5 HP or less, and this is where you can choose to trade or attack into them for value, and making sure that your Gundam RX-78 survives. And if you ever take damage, this is say you take 4 damage here, you still get to repair 2 at the end of the turn, keeping your unit here, which is completely healthy and linked, and your opponent still has to find a way to address it afterwards. If not, go straight for the base and keep attacking shields over and over. Otherwise, the other level 4 play is where you get to play out Gelgoog, and by simply trashing anything that is Zeon trait unit, and if you have a pilot, which this is not paired with, you can immediately pair it with char right underneath it for free. So with that, you will gain a link unit, so you can attack right away with it, gaining additional 1 AP, and now this is going to be a 6/4 attacker, and also with high maneuver as well. If you ever have multiple chars in the trash because of that, as long as you have Gelgoog, you can continue to repeat this combo over and over and keep sliding char underneath and keep attacking aggressively just like that. Otherwise, in the later stages of the game as well, another way to play around blockers with this high maneuver of char, aside from utilizing that, this is where you can use G Fighter to give one of your white base team traits high maneuver as well, where you can give it to a Gundam that you have on the board, or you can give it to itself. And if you give it to itself, then you want to make sure that you're linking with Armor Ray, so then you can go for the link, and then you can also attack to finish games off. Exactly how you win, and that is exactly how you want to keep attacking as much as possible into your opponents, and that's all you ever need to think of, which is very easy to understand and very beginner friendly, which I highly recommend you guys to try it out. If you want to support me and the channel even further, make sure to grab the first assembly collection on the AVAULT store right now, which has all the essential TCG accessories that you need to get started. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. You guys have a great day, great night, wherever you are. See you next video, and this is AVAULT signing out.